Should the Detroit Pistons have interest in the free agent centers this offseason? We're going to talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. We got a report that sounds like the Pistons president of basketball operations decision might be coming sooner than we previously thought. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Then also, I want to briefly touch on my thoughts on the Pistons' defensive identity. You'll see what I mean, I should say, a little bit later. But this is a topic that, again, this is very early in the offseason, so we're going to probably hit on this numerous times. But I want to talk about the free agent centers being rumored to Detroit. If you look at a lot of Bleacher Report articles, heck, you look at the Athletic articles, you just look anywhere in the Pistons community, one of the main things you see that I think is universally agreed upon across the Pistons community so far, from what I've seen, is that the Pistons need to go out and get a defensive center this offseason to start in front of Jalen Duren. So whether Jalen Duren is traded or if he's coming off the bench as the backup five, either way, it seems like most everyone wants a new starting center and one that has elite defense or near elite defensive skills. I just want to briefly touch on this because I think it's a much deeper conversation than that. I think the Pistons, and these are one of the questions. This is just one of the questions that the Pistons are going to find themselves having to answer this offseason. That's going to be like long-term answers. There's a lot of those that they're going to have to answer this offseason because of how bad this past offseason or this past season went. But with the centers, again, from what we've heard through reporting, what we've read, now this all could change if they hire a president of basketball operations that feels completely different and just completely 180s it. And that could happen. So take this with a grain of salt because, like I said, once he gets hired, who knows where it goes. Maybe everything completely changes. But from what we've read, it sounds like that the organization views Cade Cunningham and Ausar Thompson as the cornerstones. Again, this is what it seems like from reporting that the organization views this as. If we are going to follow down that road, that is Cade and Ausar, your cornerstones, this is, again, a question I've brought up on the podcast numerous times. Can you play another non-shooter next to Ausar Thompson? Is that something that you can do and get away with? And this past season, I think you got a lot of evidence that says no, but I don't think you got concrete evidence that's no. To act like this past season you didn't get a sample of it and it didn't look good, like it clearly just didn't look good this past season. Now, did it have spurts? Like, again, everyone likes to point to the first 3 games of the year where the defense was flying all over the place and the Pistons offense wasn't that great, but they were able to win 2 games because the defense was creating opportunities and stopping people. So I get that. But for a large majority of the season, having another non-shooter on the floor with Ausar Thompson, it did not look good. And I've mentioned this all the time as well. The brief stretch that we had with Gallinari at the 5 and with Mike Muscala at the 5, the Pistons destroyed teams with those guys at the 5 and Ausar Thompson at the 4. Like they were blitzing teams in those minutes. Gallinari was a plus 18.8. Gallinari and Ausar Thompson. Mike Muscala was a plus 18.3. Mike Muscala, Ausar Thompson. Those minutes dominated. So to me, when I look at that, and also, like I say all the time, like, does it follow the logic test? So, like, logically, does having 4 shooters around Ausar Thompson make sense? Yeah. Okay, well, how did it play out? Oh, it actually played out really well. Logically, does playing Ausar with another non-shooter, does it sound like it can make sense? There's questions. It maybe could, but there's a lot of questions about it working. What did the evidence show us? I would find it hard to hear anyone say it looked good this past offseason. So that's where I find myself. I don't even have a definitive answer yet. I just find myself not bought in either way with what they should do this offseason at the center position. Because if they were to go out and get Nic Claxton, let's say Nic Claxton, their defense would get a lot better. That's a lob threat, interior presence, athletic guy. Again, he would make the defense better, absolutely no doubt. But could you survive enough offensively with Ausar and Claxton on the floor together? I just don't know. The same thing with Isaiah Hartenstein. Can you survive with Ausar and Hartenstein on the floor together on offense? I just don't know. I want to say no. Like, that's where I'm leaning pretty heavily right now. But I don't want to say it's absolutely concrete because this last season wasn't, I guess, the greatest context, but I thought it was enough to have an answer. So I'm leaning towards no, but I'll leave the door open. And then you end up getting your way into the conversation of, is Cade going to play his best offensively if you have Ausar Thompson and another non-shooter on the floor with him? I mean, all that we've heard is that they need spacing. You talk to anyone outside of Detroit, get spacing around Cade. Heck, again, I'll reference this numerous times. Last season when we had his brother on the podcast, it was pretty evident to me and anyone who watched it that they very clearly want spacing. That's what they want. And this past season, they didn't really have it again, and you see how the season went. So it's like, will Cade have enough spacing with Ausar and a non-shooting center on the floor? I tend to say no. Like, even if you put Simone Fontecchio in another, let's say you get another sharpshooting, like, 2-guard next to him. Even if you do that, is that enough? Is that enough space created to have cleaner driving lanes, to free up drives, not just for Cade, but for other players on the floor? Will that free up enough space to limit turnovers? Because a lot of the Pistons' turnovers this past year, a lot of the turnover problems came from there not being a lot of space and driving into a lot of bodies. So that's the question the Pistons are having to answer this offseason. And I understand both sides. The defense from Jalen Duren this past season was horrific. The Pistons' defense was terrible. So wanting to go out and get Claxton, wanting to go out and get Hartenstein. I saw some Pistons fans say, go get Clint Capella. Like, I get that. I completely understand that. And it makes sense. It does. I'm not sitting here saying it doesn't make sense. I see the logic behind it, 100%. Just my only question back to it is, okay, but if Cade and Ausar are the cornerstones, is that what you want with them? Is that what's going to get the most out of them? And I don't know. Now, obviously, the question that you guys probably have back to me is, well, Koo, is it just easy to get stretch fives? No, it isn't. That is true. It's not easy to get stretch fives. I think the Pistons should be trying to exhaust. If I was the Pistons front office, I would be exhausting all options across the league, see if I can find a stretch five that I could trade for. In this draft, I've been told a few guys that are stretch fives that I'm going to be scouting and having episodes on, and I'll find out if I feel like they're good enough to where I'll throw out there the Pistons maybe trading back to get a stretch five. I don't know. I don't have the exact answer with that. But these are just questions that are on the board that it feels like really what I want to get across is that with every Pistons move, it feels like, I think a lot of people feel the same way, are understanding this, is that with every Pistons move, there's like 20 questions that come from it. You cannot look at one Pistons move with one thought in your head. Because, for example, let's move off this topic real quick and say the Pistons keep their 5th overall pick and want to draft another guy. From everything we've read, it doesn't sound like the Pistons want to bring back all the young guys again. Like all the young guys and a draft pick. So if you keep the 5th overall pick, that probably means you're moving off of one of the young guys then. And which guy are you moving off of? And what are you doing it for? So once you answer one question, like 5 new timelines, Loki branches, time off or branch off that you have to answer now. And this is one of those situations. So look, I think the Pistons should upgrade the center position, yes. And if they do it with Claxton, I'll be supportive of it because I understand it. If it is Hartenstein, I'll be supportive of it because I understand it. I just think there's going to be another question that comes of it that I'll be interested to see this offseason. Because I won't sit here and say we got enough sample size of the stretch big next to Ausar to act like, oh, that's concrete. That was enough sample size. It is what it is. I think it was a decent sample size. I think it matches the logical thought process. But if they want to see what Asar next to a non-shooter at the 5 position to see if the defense can translate into offense, I get it. I just think that it's something you should really consider before you do it. Because let's say you give a longer contract. Let's say you give a 3-year, 4-year contract to a Claxton, to a Hartenstein, and then in year 1, it becomes evident, oh, this guy just can't work with Asar. And Asar's our cornerstone, one of our cornerstones. He can't fit on the floor offensively. It's not working. Now what do you do? So, like I said, I'll support either decision because I understand both ways. It's just, you got to really think hard about it. So I want to hear where you guys stand with it. Should the Pistons go out and get one of those defensive centers next to Cade, next to Asar, next to whoever's in the starting lineup to try to bolster their defense? Can they survive offensively with that? Or do you think they should go out and try to get a stretch 5 at the 5 position to fit better offensively with Cade, with Asar, and whoever else in the starting lineup? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kukahill where you guys stand on it. When we come back, is there an update on the president of basketball operations? Could we be seeing a decision come soon with the Pistons president of basketball operations? We'll talk about that when we come back. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And my favorite thing about PrizePicks, yes, it's fun. Yes, it has many options to do, many sports to go with in your entries on it. But my favorite part is the injury insurance policy they have. Let's say you have someone in your entry in an NBA game and they get hurt in the first half and don't return the second half. Anywhere else, you're screwed. But with PrizePicks, that player is automatically rebooted. That is an absolute lifesaver, and it's why I love PrizePicks so much. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Download, again, the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your #1 ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guarantee Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. With eBay Guarantee Fit, only available to U.S. customers at ebaymotors.com. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So I'm recording this on May 17th. It's going to be posted later on today. So anything that happens after May 17th, well, let's go ahead and give the time to. I'm recording at 6 p.m. It's going to be a late night episode. If anything happens after this time, I was unaware, obviously. So don't hold me to it. But obviously, in order for the Pistons' whole offseason to get kickstarted, for us to really get a full grasp on what they're trying to do, what the idea, what the vision for this franchise is, they need to get president of basketball operations. And right now, they do not have one, obviously. All we know as of this point is Troy Weaver has lost final basketball say. All signs reporting to Troy Weaver no longer being with the Detroit Pistons after they hired their president of basketball operations. And at the very least, Monty Williams' future being up in the air once they hire a president of basketball operations. Last week, we got their 3 final candidates for the president of basketball operations. We also heard that they're interested in Tim Connolly of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who helped build the Timberwolves. Again, he also was the one who pulled the trade in the Rudy Gobert trade. He also helped build the Denver Nuggets, who are the reigning NBA champions. That is what we heard latest. That is until earlier this week, we heard something from Omari Sankofa II of the Detroit Free Press. Remember, on the last episode, we talked about this. I believe it was like 3 episodes ago or something. I spoke about how if the Pistons were to want to wait for Tim Connelly, because right now, to give the full, explanation of his situation, he has an opt-out on his contract with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Right now, the Minnesota Timberwolves have a situation going on with their ownership where Alex Rodriguez and his team are trying to purchase the Timberwolves. Current Timberwolves owner agreed to, then pulled out. Now they're going back and forth. There's people talking about whether the ownership wants to spend as much money as they are going to have to keep that team together. Is the owner going to be cheap? Does he want to stick around if it means breaking away the team? Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on with the Timberwolves ownership that may, not for sure, because these are just rumors, but may make Tim Connelly want to get out. And it happens to happen the same year, same offseason, that he has an opt-out in his contract. In order for that to happen, obviously the Timberwolves season would have to end. Timberwolves right now, as of right now, they're heading into a Game 7 after just blitzing the Denver Nuggets. So in the last episode, we talked about how if the Timberwolves were to make it to the NBA Finals, do you really want to wait until like a week before the NBA draft and like 2 weeks before free agency to finally get your president of basketball operations? And what happens if he says no at that point? Now what? Now you're signing one of the other guys with a week to go? Like, I think it's just something to think about, I would say. However, speaking of that, and for those of you guys who want to know who the 3 candidates were, I'm sorry, I completely didn't even say their names. That's my fault. You got New Orleans Pelicans general manager Trajan Langdon. You got Dallas Mavericks advisor Dennis Lindsey. You obviously, like I said, you got Tim Connelly. And then you got Chicago Bulls GM Mark Eversley. And a new name that was connected in this article from Omari was Scott Perry, the former GM of the New York Knicks. So you got all those names. And again, like I said, last we heard where the Pistons were really wanting to go after Tim Connelly if it was possible. And then I brought up all the concerns, et cetera, that could come with that if if the Timberwolves go deep into the playoffs. What's funny with that is that Omari says in his article that, I'm trying to find the exact, I just lost the exact quote. Where is the, oh, here it is. Thank you. I scrolled all the way to the top of this article for some reason, and I lost my spot. My apologies. But in this article, Omari said, quote, "But the clock may run out on Connelly, as one source suggests the Pistons could conclude their head of basketball operations search within the next week or so." What I find extremely funny about that is I think this is the timing of that is purposely, are the Timberwolves going to lose? Are they going to beat Denver? Or are they going to lose to Denver? If they beat Denver, this sounds like the Pistons are going to move on to their next, whoever, of those candidates we just talked about. We're going to move on and get that guy, that's going to be their thinking. If the Timberwolves lose this Game 7 in Denver, which my prediction is yes, I think they're going to lose to Denver. Let me know who you guys think is going to win this series. This has been a crazy up and down series, but I think Denver pulls it out in Game 7, goes on to the Western Conference Finals. If that is indeed what happens, now all of a sudden within the next week or two, like said in the article, the Pistons are going to be able to talk with Tim Connelly. Is he going to opt out of his contract? Will they get to agreement with him? Everything that's been reported about this is that it's going to take a lot of money to get Connelly away from the Timberwolves. Tom Gores will spend the money. James has said this in his article. I've said this on the podcast for the last few months, that if there's one thing that Tom Gores will do, he will spend money if he thinks it's going to help the team. Now, the problem is he spent money in things he thinks will help the team, and it hasn't. But he'll put the money where his mouth is. So I think that's what I really think the Pistons are just sitting here waiting to see the outcome of this series. Waiting to see, do the Timberwolves win or do they lose? If they win, Tim Connelly's going to be lasting a little while. They probably don't want to wait that long. They probably don't want to, wait till the last second right before the draft to really get started on this whole thing. So we'll see what happens. I want to hear from you guys, though. Which of these candidates, besides Connolly, do you guys have the most interest in? Do you guys think the Pistons, if the Timberwolves win, do you think they should continue to wait with the chance at Connolly? And do you think the Timberwolves are going to win? I want to hear from you guys about the playoffs, too. Will the Timberwolves win? Will the Nuggets win? Let me know all that. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, I want to talk about the Pistons' future defensive identity, where my thoughts go with the Pistons' defensive identity of the future. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You've already talked about that numerous times. But there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much more to get. You get unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis, which is my favorite part, for taunting friends talking that trash when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini-games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko machines. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on with Monopoly Go. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So I believe this was actually Wednesday's episode of this past week, so the 15th episode. I spoke about what the biggest takeaways for me were from the playoffs when connecting it to the Pistons, not just overall NBA thoughts, but like watching the playoffs and connecting it to the Pistons. What are my takeaways? And my biggest takeaway was that the Pistons don't have an identity. And even more of a problem than an identity, I think the biggest problem with the Pistons organization has been they have too many cooks in the kitchen and they don't have a unified vision on what this team should look like, what they want it to look like, and how to get there. I think they're all over the place with all of those, all over the place. And that's why they've struggled so much over the last few years. Their main goal this offseason is whatever the vision is. For example, I would not bring all the young guys back. I would probably trade one of Ivy or Duren. I wouldn't be against trading both of them if it got good players in return. But even if that's where my stance is, but if the GM or the president of basketball operations, comes in, and they all agree upon from the top down, one linear ideology, one linear vision is we're going to bring these young guys back. We're going to build this team this way. We're going to build this team with this as the identity. We're going to draft this person that fits into this. Like, if that's what they want to do, then as long as they're on one clear vision, then at the very least, I'll be cool with it. I may disagree with the vision, but I'm much happier with that vision, with that route, rather than being all over the place and not knowing exactly what you're actually wanting to build and not having an identity and not building towards something. For example, like this past season, can you label anything? Like, if you just looked at last year's team, what were they building, trying to be? Like, what was their identity offensively? What were they trying to do? Defensively, what were they trying to build their roster to be? What was their scheme? What was the scheme that they were trying to build? Like, I don't feel like you've seen a vision for real with this team. You've seen glimpses of, like, you can try to make some stuff out, but that, along with all the cooks in the kitchen, it's been a problem. It's been a problem. So I tweeted out, I believe 2 days ago, and I was like, I want to hear from you guys. What would you guys want the Pistons' identity to be? What do you guys want the Pistons to build towards being? Like, what do you want their roster moves to build towards? And we're going to have a full episode. I'm going to bring a guest on. I'm not going to tell you guys who it is. I'm not going to tell you when it's happening yet. It should be happening soon, though. But I'm going to bring a guest on. I'm going to give what I want the Pistons' identity to be, what I think they should be building towards on both ends of the floor. And I want to hear from the guests I bring on what they think the Pistons should build towards. But I want to real quickly touch on what I believe the Pistons' defensive identity should be. And I guess this will give you an insight into why I think the way I think with roster construction moving forward this offseason. I think the main thing, and I've heard this through people I've talked with, and this is not, I would say, what's the word I want to say? This is not some random thought that I have. This is something that there are people that think the same way and want to take advantage of this, that I've talked with. And I'm not talking about just some randoms like some fans or anything. I think you guys can put pieces, like you guys can understand what I'm saying. That one of the strengths, one of the pros of drafting Cade as your point guard is that it gives you the ability to have him being the smallest defender on the floor to where you can switch across the board. You have good defenders across the board, and you don't have anyone that can get picked on because you guys are all at least 6'6", 6'7". So with that, I fall directly in line with that. If you guys were listening to the podcast back when they won the lottery in Cade's draft and they drafted Cade, this was something I said at that time. So the first thing with the defensive identity, I want someone next to Cade. That's the main thing. Someone next to Cade that has his size or bigger. Heck, if you even want to put Asar as the 2 defensively, like I wouldn't even have a problem with that. Just the first thing I want to do, I want to have a lineup of Cade 6'6" as the point guard, and then everyone across the board having versatile, positionless length and size. And when I say that, I don't mean when I say length and size, I don't want necessarily, because if you can get one of these, it's probably a superstar, so it's going to be hard to get one of those. But at the center position, I would sacrifice some size at that position. Like instead of having like a 7-foot guy, I'm fine with having like a 6'9", 6'10" dude there that maybe isn't the tallest, but is a long, switchable defender that can guard 5s, 4s, 3s, and switch on the perimeter if he has to. So now you have a lineup from 6'6" to 6'10", all across all 5 of your guys, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", 6'9", 6'10". So now if you have to, switch across the board. If you can, there's no real, like, I forget the word that I be listening to JJ Redick's podcast all the time. I know you guys, I tell you guys that all the time, but I forget the word he uses, but there's no weak link to attack. There is no weak spot on the floor for you to be going at because each guy on the floor is a capable defender and each guy on the floor has adequate size and length and strength. That would be goal number one. Goal number one defensively for this team. I think they have to go. Now, I'm not going to get into anything else because I'm going to save that for the episode. But that's what I wanted to talk about. That's where I believe the Pistons' defensive identity should start. And that's why I'm more in the camp of I'm okay with moving off of Ivy because I don't think he's ever going to be even an average defender. And he's not he's not like tiny. He's not Marcus Sasser, but he's not big either. So it's like, and he's smaller than Cade, basically, I guess is why I should say. He's smaller than Cade, and he's not a good defender. So that's not how I'd want this team built. If I can, I want to have everyone either Cade size or above. And I think that should have been, at least I feel like, one of the main reasons for drafting Cade is that you have a bigger point guard, and now you don't have to have small guys on the floor. Now, if you go to the backups, you go to the backup point guard, and you have like a smaller dude like Dennis Schroeder or something, like, cool. Like, that's no big deal. But in your starting lineup, being able to close the game with like all 6'6" and above guys that you can't really just go out and target defensively, I think would be huge. I think it's absolutely huge and should be the main goal of the Pistons defense identity moving forward. So that's where I stand with that. I want to hear from you guys. Like I said, we're going to have that episode coming soon when we talk with a guest about what the Pistons identity on both sides of the floor should be and how they should build towards it. Monday's episode coming up should be the first prospect episode. We should be talking about Matas Bazulis. I'm going to be finishing up my film on him tonight. I'll have that ready for you guys Monday, and then we'll move into the next prospect. There's going to be a lot of prospects that we got to talk about this offseason, obviously, because it's just such a wide range of possible guys in this draft. So I'm probably not going to be able to spend as much time as I did last year on prospects. Like last year, I usually spent like a week and a half on each one, I feel like. Probably won't be able to do that this year. You're going to have to spend like a few days to get all of them in this offseason because there is probably like, I won't be shocked if like by the end of the offseason, we've had like 20 plus prospect episodes because it's possible the Pistons move back. Like it's all over the place. So just wanted to give you guys an update with that. Monday should be Matas Bazulis. That will be the first prospect episode, so stay tuned for that. That's all I've got for you guys today, though. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit the subscribe button to the YouTube channel or Give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.